Well, welcome everybody. What a great turnout. Now, who's excited about hearing Larry Elder? Are there any veterans in the room? I want to honor the veterans. Can you stand? Republican Alliance, one of our models is taking a stand for America and Israel.
Make America great again. That's what we're doing.
As cantor Phil Darren sings the national anthem and also honors Israel with Hatikvah. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say There's another person I want to acknowledge. Without him, none of this would have been possible. Please give a warm round of applause for Rabbi Ed Feinstein, who makes it all possible. Thank you, Rabbi. And we now behalf of the JRR family, Jerry family, I want to thank all our sponsors, our VIP sponsors. Thank you all, one and all, for your generous support. We really appreciate it. That goes without saying, I also have to say this. I want to honor my wife, Judy. I also want to thank my co-founder, Mitch Silverman, and his wife, Stephanie Silverman. There's some people in the audience I want to acknowledge. In the audience, Larry Greenfield. Where's Larry? Larry's been a great friend to GRA. He is speaking at our Valley chapter on April 6th. At Graybar Country Club. So come out and see Larry. Larry, thank you for all you do. Also, I want to thank Barack Puri, who's in the audience. Barack had Mitch and I on his radio show. He's a great guy, and also he has a new book out called Atheism Kills. And it's on sale in the front desk there. He'll leave an autograph for you, and if he runs out, you can buy it on Amazon. Thank you so much. You know, the Jewish Republican Alliance started in March of 2016 with 18 people in the back room of Agora Hills restaurant. And look at us now. We have 4 chapters, one in the Conejo Valley, San Fernando Valley, West Los Angeles, and our new chapter in Newport Beach. Some of our community leaders are here today. I want to acknowledge them. If you could please stand when I call your name. Mark Widauer, Asmara Stinsky, Simone Gold, Gary Amanoff, and Howard Weisenfeld. Thank you all. You know, we are thrilled to have President Trump and Vice President Pence. I saw a speech from Vice President Pence when he said, "I'm here to convey a simple message from the heart of the American people. We stand with Israel." He went on to say, in the story of the Jews, we've always seen the story of America. It is the story of an exodus, a journey from persecution to freedom, a story that shows the power of faith and the promise of hope. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for filling the room. Thank you for coming out and supporting us and for Larry. And now I'm going to bring you Mitch Silverman, another co-founder.
First of all, I do want to thank all of you for attending this wonderful event tonight. GRA members and guests, UDS members, Democrats and Republicans alike. We're thrilled to have you all here. And I want to publicly thank our GRA volunteers. They showed up so early and worked so tirelessly and selflessly. If you're a GRA volunteer and pulled this event off, please stand up so we can acknowledge you. Thank you. And also, a heartfelt thank you to the VIP sponsors who made tonight possible. You don't have to stand if you don't want to. Barry Wolf, Courtney Johnson of Tag Time USA, Reed Shudd, Jeb Levy, Phil and Monique Krakowski, S.R. Spitzky, Christine Masdam, Joyce Lucas, my dad, Alan Solo. Thank you all for generously supporting this. So I want you to look around. Look at the people here. Look to your right. Look to your left. No, left, not left. No, sorry. Aren't you excited to know you're not alone? Yeah. I want to say many of the audience have their own individual perspective, and that's great. And I want to invite you to learn about our organization, our values, perhaps even appreciate our perspectives. The JRA was founded on our commonality of values and passion to take a stand for America and Israel. Our three pillars are very simple. Fellowship, you're not alone. Education, the JRA serves as a platform for conservative speakers and organizations. And finally, networking. We found people like to do business with people they like, trust, and share values with. And there's so much at stake now for California, America, Israel, and to our children and families. So much at stake. Our JRA community exists to preserve the Judeo-Christian values upon which our great country was founded. Equally important, our strong bond with Israel must remain rock solid. Now more than ever, conservative activism is needed. We are the Jewish Republican Alliance. We want your involvement and become a member today. We'd love to have you involved. Thank you.
So you asked, how do I do that? Well, look on your chairs, behind your chairs, you'll see about 1,000 of these postcards that we put out. After the meeting, if you'd like to join us and join our group, feel free to take this to the hall. We'll have people standing by to get your membership signed up. So now, we are blessed to have a good friend, Reed Shudd, who's going to introduce Larry. Reed Shudd is a good friend. Every time I called him for help, he's always been there. He's been such a great support of the Jewish Republican Alliance. He's a super lawyer, many, many years. And he graduated from the University of Southern California Gould Law School. And I've heard it said that if Larry Elder is the sage from South Central, that Reed is a wise man from Beverly Hills. Reed Shudd, everybody.
So I have the privilege of introducing our featured speaker, Larry Elder. And I can share with you all of his extremely impressive professional achievements. He's a New York Times best-selling author, an Emmy winner. He's got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's been profiled on 60 Minutes, on 2020. He's been on The Tonight Show. Of course, you know he's a frequent guest on cable news shows. And he's produced and directed a full documentary movie. In addition, Larry has written a weekly, nationally syndicated column for 20 years. And he's currently, of course, a nationally syndicated radio host, operating in 300 markets to over 1 billion listeners. Now, many of you listen to his daily broadcasts on 870 AM Salem Radio. And then there are some of us, who Larry calls his Eldorados, who subscribe and listen to his broadcasts by podcast, being directly to our smartphones and computers. And of course, many of us visit his website for all of the things that he puts on it from his show, LarryElder.com. Larry's a native Angelino. He went to Crenshaw High. He got his undergraduate degree from Brown University. And his law degree from the University of Michigan. After that, he worked for a very large Cleveland law firm for several years, and then branched out to create his own attorney search and placement service, which he operated for about a decade in Cleveland. Now, I won't go into how Larry got into talk show radio, because while it's a wonderful story, it's a very extended story. But for those of you who still read, I suggest that you go and read the 20 years of Larry's weekly columns, which can be found, oddly enough, online, archived on JewishWorldReview.com. Now, for those of you who haven't become regular listeners of Larry's show, you should know that he serves as a mentor to anyone who's willing to listen to a discussion of incredibly well-researched and certified facts and no hyperbole. More than once, I've sent emails to Larry with stories I think he should discuss on his show, and only to receive his very polite and very kind reply with a site where I can look to see my story debunked. And he gets many of his facts from left-leaning sources like the New York Times, other such publications, which just add to the credibility and authenticity of his discussions. Aside from being incredibly informative and eye-opening in his own presentations on his show, Larry has the stature to bring in very prominent, authoritative, and articulate guests to discuss the matters of the day. But what most of you may not know is that Larry isn't just a brilliant and thoughtful talk show host. In person, he's also one of the kindest and most considerate folks you'll ever want to meet. He's deeply respectful, engaging, and never condescending. He was deeply influenced by his parents, as was I, and he often comments how his father, as my own, have been gone for several years, but seems to keep getting smarter every day. I was deeply moved by Larry's most recent and most successful book, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, in which Larry chronicles his father's ordeals and triumphs from the most humble beginnings that you can imagine, and how Larry rekindled his love for his father after he became older and wiser. Only an empathetic and perceptive man could write such a celebration. And like father, like son, Larry never takes anything for granted, and often repeats his father's credo that the secret to success is hard work. Daily Variety called Larry a firebrand libertarian, and others call him many other, even less complimentary. Some of his fans have said he'd be a great politician. I beg to differ because, unfortunately, Larry's too honest for that position. I'm deeply honored to introduce him because he's truly a gentleman and a scholar, and there are very few of us left. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Elder.
Let's see if you feel that way after I've spoken. I met Reeve Chudd a few years ago, several years ago, and I said to him when I first heard him give his name, I said, "You must be a lawyer." He said, "How did you know?" I said, "Well, when your name is Reeve Chudd, you can't be a sex trafficker or a drug dealer. You gotta be a lawyer." Thank you so much for having me. I want to give you the Cliff Notes version of how I got into talk radio. But for Dennis Prager, I would not be here. Dennis Prager had me on the show. Dennis Prager had me on the show, and after we did an hour, he complimented me, and I suggested that he mention me to management, and Dennis said, in all my years on radio, I have never recommended that management hire anybody, but I will do so for you. But for Dennis, I wouldn't be here. But the story began a couple of years earlier. I was living and working in Cleveland, and every now and then I would get one of my articles published. I was not a columnist in those days. I wanted to be, but nobody hired me. So I would write columns and send them to the Upbringing Journal and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, just over the transcript. And most of the time I would get a polite little card saying, "Thank you very much for your submission, but we're not going to publish it at this time." But every now and then one would get published. And I sent one where I talked about blacks and racism, and that blacks need to work hard, recognize the country is radically changed, and racism is no longer a major problem in America. I get saying that today is controversial. Saying that 25, 30 years ago when I first said it in that article was just bombshell for people. So I got a phone call from a producer of a radio show. "Do you really believe that racism is no longer a major problem in America?" I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Hard work wins now?" Talked a bit about my dad. "Would you come on a show tonight and talk about it on the air?" I said, "Sure." I was on a show called The World Polish Show. I was on for an hour. They told me I'd be on for 5 or 10 minutes. And as a host now, I know you always say that to a guest because the guest may suck. And if the guest is good, you keep them there longer. I was there for a whole hour, which is an eternity in talk radio. Now Cleveland is about 60% black. And so the callers were almost all black. And I was called an Uncle Tom. I was called a bootlicking Uncle Tom. I was called a foot shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom. I was called an Oreo, brown on the outside, white on the inside, coconut, same concept, the Antichrist. And I was called the name you call a black person when you really want to wound, hurt, and cut it. I was called Republican. But the one thing I wasn't called, I was called Uncle Tom, bootlicking, shuffling Uncle Tom, jasp Uncle Tom, sellout, all the names, but I was not called wrong. One of the things that I often talk about is what I call the access of indoctrination. We're talking about Hollywood, academia, and media. And it is unreal, the effect it has on how people think and read. Hollywood. There was a movie a few years ago called Hurricane. Anybody see it? It's extraordinary when you think about how a movie like that gets made. It starred Denzel Washington. And the movie depicts a man who was completely innocent, sweet guy, was hounded by a vicious, racist detective who wanted him in jail. In reality, Ruben Hurricane Carter was a thug. He had bragged before one of his fights. He took a knife and stabbed a guy everywhere but the bottom of his feet. The detective was in fact a Vietnam vet who had suffered an illness, suffered an accident when he was in the Army, in the military, and disfigured his face. And therefore, the person that was this evil person depicted in the movie was somebody with a disfigured face, but you never knew why his face was disfigured. He was disfigured because he's a Vietnam vet. It never came out in the movie. In the movie, it said that he was convicted by 2 all-white juries, false. There were 2 blacks in the second jury. He had taken and flunked the polygraph. There was eyewitness, there was physical evidence, there was all this stuff. Overwhelming evidence of guilt. I said this on the air. I get a phone call from somebody who played one of the characters. If you saw the movie, there was a character named Leslie Martin, who was the protagonist of the film, Canadian, who believed that Hurricane Carter was innocent and essentially got him another child, which ultimately got him free. He called the show. He said, I'm the actor who played Leslie Martin. I am offended by what you're saying. This is a movie we spent a lot of money on, we spent a lot of money researching it. How dare you? I said, there is a website called graphicwitness.com/Carter. You take a look at it. It'll take you about 10 hours to read everything. But you read that, have the cashew to call me tomorrow and apologize. To his credit, he called the next night and he apologized. He said, I am stunned. A few years after that, I'm doing a book signing at the LA Times Book Festival in UCLA. A woman comes up to me, she said, have you met me privately? I go over to the side, she says, I'm on the Academy Award nominating committee. We almost nominated Hurricane for Best Picture. Until one of us heard your show and told us what you said. We all looked at graphicwitness.com/Carter. I am astounded. She said, this movie got made. Had we nominated it and won the Oscar, who knows how that would have been embarrassing. There's another movie they made called, I think it's called Truth, about Dan Rather. Remember Dan Rather and that bogus story that he used to try to show that George W. Bush got special treatment in the Texas Air National Guard? They made a movie, and now all of a sudden Robert Redford plays Dan Rather, and he's a hero. Nothing about how bogus this stuff was, completely changed the story. It's stunning. They did a movie about Valerie Plame. Remember Valerie Plame, the CIA operative who was allegedly outed by the George W. Bush administration? She was not a covert operative. But they did a whole movie about her, made her a hero. How does this happen? It's stunning. Jeffrey Katzenberg alone raised about $16 million for Hillary, both races. Overwhelmingly, when Hollywood makes donations, overwhelmingly the money goes to Democrat causes. Overwhelmingly, not even close. Not even close. And anybody in Hollywood who is a 20-something-year-old person, who is an overt Trump supporter, your career just ended. It's done. Academia. There was a study in American Spectator that looked at colleges, north, south, east, west, public, private. Overwhelmingly, left wing. Not even close. You can get a department that has 20 or 30 political science professors. It's not uncommon to have all 20 or 30 Democrats. You look at commencement speakers. They've done a study showing overwhelmingly the speakers are from the left. When I spoke at Santa Monica High School years ago at the request of Stephen Miller, who's now an aide to President Trump, I was told by the principal that my speech had to be offset by a liberal speaker. When I informed her that according to Stephen Miller, you've had a number of union reps coming here giving speeches, and you offset them with conservatives, she changed the subject. The way that students who are conservatives are being pushed around in our colleges and universities and even at the high school level is stunning. I once talked about the minimum wage on my show. And this alleged gap between what women make and what men make for the very same amount of money. Allegedly, women make 77 cents on the dollar for the same amount of money. And so I said on the air, the next time your teacher says that, you say to your teacher, if that were true, if you're a self-respecting business person, male or female, you would fire all the women, hire men, fire all the men, hire women, and pocket the difference. This kid calls me, he says, Larry, last night I heard your show. Today, my teacher said that we need to have a law to close the gap between what men and women earn. And I told her what she said. I said, if it's true that women only earn 77 cents on the dollar, why wouldn't somebody fire all the men and just hire women? And he said, Larry, it was like the teacher got hit in the head with a 2x4. It was beautiful. Hollywood, academia, and media. One of my friends is a man named Tim Grosclose, Grosclos. He wrote a wonderful book called Left Turn. And then he tries to, for the first time, quantify what you and I would call damage done by the left-wing media. And there are experiment he mentions. Most big cities only have one major newspaper now, but there are a couple of cities that have two. One of them is Washington, D.C. They have a paper called the Washington Post, obviously, and there's one called the Washington Times, which is conservative. What researchers did, find households that had never subscribed to the Washington Times, the conservative newspaper, offered them free subscriptions to find out whether or not it would affect their voting patterns. And did the same thing on the other way. People that had never subscribed to the other newspaper got free subscriptions to find out if it would affect their voting patterns. And it turned out that voting patterns were affected in both cases. The household that had never gotten the Washington Post started voting somewhat more liberally. The household that had gotten the Washington Times started voting substantially more conservatively. His conclusion is that if the top 20 sources of our media were not left-wing, I'm talking about CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, LA Times, Chicago Tribune, the top 20 sources, only two of them lean to the right, and that's the Washington Times and the Fox News with Red Hair. That's it. That's it. He concludes that if the media were truly fair and balanced, the average state would vote the way Texas does, which is about 8 to 10 points in favor of the Republican. This is the damage done by our left-wing media. If most people were exposed to the other side, they vote differently. But they're not. This is what I call the access of indoctrination. And it is really a potent, malicious force that is convincing people that America is not a shining city on a hill, that America is a country that has routinely exploited people, that have routinely exercised sexism, racism, you name it. The 800-pound gorilla in this room is a man named Donald Trump. Trump was not my first choice. Out of 17 Republicans, I think he was my 20th. And you might recall that time he kind of had his coming out party where he talked about Mexicans being rapists and this, that, and the other. And I saw that at home. I said, he's done. It's over. But the next day I'm in Sunland at a place called Coco's, which is like Denny's. My dad's restaurant served that kind of food, that's the kind of breakfast I like, so I'm there having breakfast, sitting at the bar. Guy comes up to me, got paint all over himself, obviously a painter. Not that kind of painter, but a house painter. And he said, did you see Trump last night? Did you see Trump last night? I said, yeah. And he said, what do you think? I said, what do you think? He speaks for me. He walked away. About 5 minutes later, another guy comes up. Same kind of dress. Charlie's a blue-collar guy, worked with his hands. Did you see Trump last night during Larry Hilton? What did you think? He said, man, he nailed it. I think I get behind that guy. He walked away. I'm there for about an hour and 15 minutes. It happened about 8 times. Each person coming up to me, all white. Went on the air that night and I said, this guy's going to win the nomination. He's going to become the next president. I've never seen anybody connect with people like that since Ronald Reagan. And I remember when Ann Coulter was on the Bill Maher show. Remember that? And Bill Maher said, who do you think is going to get the nomination? She said, out of the declared candidates, she said Donald Trump. And the House came down. You take Ann Coulter out of the equation, Donald Trump doesn't become president. She wrote that book called Adios America, which she read, and Donald Trump understood that immigration, illegal immigration, is a major, major problem in America. And I'm not sure he still understands that the Democrats have realized they can't win the white vote. They've lost the white vote since 1964. They cannot convince enough white people to raise the taxes and to spend more and to regulate more. So they have to change the electorate. And that's what they've done. That's what they're doing. That's what this legal immigration is all about. Otherwise, why would they accept the deal that Donald Trump has made for Donald? 3 times as many people would be protected as Obama envisioned. They still said no. Why? Because they don't want to solve the problem. They want the borders to remain porous because they want to change the electorate. Little by little, they know there'll be pressure. Little by little, they know there's going to be pressure to grant citizenship to the illegal aliens. There is a video, we put it on my show, by a man named Eliseo Medina. He used to be a senior official with the SEIU union. He's still an official with them. And he said on the speech, if we can get 2 out of 3 of these new voters to vote for our issues, we will have a governing coalition for the long haul. This is what these guys are doing. That's why they want chain migration. That's why they want the borders to remain porous. That's why they don't want to do anything about it. Do you really believe that if 80% of new citizens would vote Republican, the borders would be porous? Really? We wouldn't have this discussion. Why do you suppose the Democrats want Washington, D.C. to be a state? 2 Democrat senators and a new Democrat congressperson. Why do you suppose the Democrats want to restore voting rights for felons? 90% of them will vote Democratic Party. This is why they don't want to do anything about the borders, because they know that these new immigrants, turned citizens, are going to vote overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party because they cannot win by making an argument, let's raise taxes, let's have a $15 minimum wage, let's go and fight climate change. They can't win with those arguments, but they can win with those arguments for people who are new to the country, who have no concept of separation of church and state, don't appreciate the Constitution, don't appreciate that we are a country that is governed by the consent of the government. They don't understand that, and they know it. It's a problem. It's a huge, huge problem. When I said on the air, Donald Trump, if he were a movie, he'd be the good, the bad, and the ugly. During the campaign, 2 days later, guess who on television says, it's Donald on a movie, he'd be the good, the bad, and the ugly. Bad impression, but that was his wife. I'm not saying she stole that from me, but she stole it from me. And what I meant by that, the good, of course, is that Donald Trump understands this country, unlike the other candidates did. Barack Obama gave us the worst economic recovery since 1949. It was a 2% recovery, the average recovery is 3%. Now that may not sound like very much, but the difference between 2% and 3% is 1 billion jobs times the length of the recovery. So if Obama had just worked on his jump shot or his putting and had not come to the Oval Office for 8 years, we would have had 7 million more jobs. To say nothing of the amount of growth we would have had. Worst economic recovery since 1949. And you look at the exit polling, the number 1 reason that he got voted was the economy. Last 2. Number 1 reason they gave was the economy. And under Trump, black poverty got worse, The so-called wealth gap between the average black family and white family didn't get that wide for 25 years. Mr. Obama put that wide for 25 years. From 2010 to 2013, black net worth fell 25%. I don't blame that on Obama, but I do believe that it happened on his watch. And the reason for the collapse is because of the housing meltdown. The reason for the housing meltdown is because a whole bunch of government workers put together a study that showed banks were not lending to black people. Black people were being turned down at a higher rate than other borrowers. The head of the Urban League was informed that the average credit application for the black applicant was worse than the average credit application for the white applicant. And he said, if you don't have good credit, that's it, you're done. But that did not stop Bill Clinton from taking the Community Reinvestment Act, which was passed by Jimmy Carter, which said to banks, you know, see what you can do about lending to underrepresented borrowers if you can. Kind of just see what you can do. And banks said, okay, we will. Because banks, of course, were concerned about the default rate. He passed a law called the Community Reinvestment Act. Bill Clinton took that law and put teeth into it, so that if a bank did not loan to enough borrowers, they were given a low CRA score. And if you're a bank and you want to have a merger, you want to put an ATM somewhere, you want to do an acquisition, and you have a low CRA score, they're going to stop you. So banks essentially were forced to change lending standards. And of course, because we have two large, what are called government-sponsored entities, Freddie and Fannie, that bought these loans, the bankers were not paying with their own money. So you go to Wall Street, and you have a bunch of people there playing with somebody else's money, because the government decided that everybody who falls up of yours should have a house, and got us into the housing business. You didn't have the problem in Canada. Canada doesn't have a Freddie and a Fannie. Canada doesn't have a policy that says anybody that falls up of yours should get a house. The reason I blame Obama is because when Obama was in private practice, he sued a bank because a woman, a client of his, did not get a loan, and Obama claimed he didn't get the loan because she was a minority. And of course, she didn't get the loan because the credit application was bad. But that did not stop Obama from suing, and a bunch of left-wing people from suing. So the standard was changed all over the country, and that is what caused this recession. So yes, I do blame Obama and the left for that. So black net worth fell 25% from 2010 to 2013. As I mentioned, the gap between the white family and the black family had been that wide 25 years. The labor force participation rate, the only thing that really matters. These are able-bodied people that are looking for work. The bigger the number, the better. The smaller the number, the worse. Had been this small for black males since they've been keeping the number, and they've been keeping the number for about 50 years. It was abysmal, which is why Donald Trump got a higher percentage of the black vote, higher percentage of the Asian vote, higher percentage of the youth vote than it did Romney. The other good, of course, is that he wants to build a wall, he wants to do something about immigration. There is an economist named George Borjas. He's probably done more work on the impact of legal and illegal immigration than any other economist. He said there's no question that illegal immigration, particularly unskilled illegal immigration, threatens jobs and puts downward pressure on wages for people living in the inner city, black and brown, the very people that the left claims they care about. Unbelievable. And Trump wants to do something about it, and it's called racist. The other good part, Trump has hired a Secretary of Education named Betsy DeVos, who is a huge scholar. I went to Crenshaw High School, as Reed mentioned. Picked up the article in the LA Times a few years ago. The average student at my alma mater, only 3% of the students can do math at grade level. 3%. And that's up from 2% the year before. Now, you are a parent living in that community. Your kid has just graduated from middle school, and now you are mandated to send your kid to a school where only 3% of the kids can do math at grade level. Are you smoking something? And Donald Trump wants the money to follow the child rather than the other way around. He's been called a racist and a bum by LeBron James. What did I just read? 600 workers, mostly black, were hired in Chicago because there was a raid where a dairy had hired 800 illegal aliens. And because of the raid, they now had to shut down, reopen, hire legal residents. And they hired 600, most of them were black, and paid them more money than the ones that were there before. And Donald Trump is the bum. The ugly the protectionist stuff that he wants to do. It turns out that Donald Trump is absolutely right. Many of these trade deals were lousy deals, and the other countries should be opening up their markets, and many of them are. But the idea that if somebody doesn't want to open up their market, you're going to put a tariff on their good is something that would make Milton Friedman spin in his grave. Milton Friedman says that tariffs discriminate against low prices. If you are in China and the Chinese government is so stupid as to make solar panels at below cost and sell them to Americans at a much cheaper rate than Americans would pay otherwise, the only thing dumber than that is to put a tariff to compound the stupidity. Let them go ahead and do it. There will be some workers displaced, there's no question about that. But collectively, the amount of money that people save vastly exceeds the few jobs that are being lost. Donald Trump doesn't quite understand that. He does understand about negotiating good deals. The ugly, I campaigned for him and with him in Cleveland. And we spoke at a black church. And before we spoke, I said to him, the one thing that I think you should apologize for, by the way, you notice Donald Trump never apologizes. His definition of an apology is not to say the same stupid thing twice. And I said, the one thing I feel you should apologize for is when you said that George W. Bush lied us into the Iraq War. Having an opposition to the war is one thing, but saying George W. Bush lied us into it, I said, the one thing in recent years that has been the most damaging thing to the Republican brand has been the Iraq War. And for you to compound it by saying not only was it the wrong war, and I don't agree with that either, that George W. Bush lied us into it, he went. Well, he never said it again. When I said I caused it, he never said it again. Do you remember the dark old days after 9/11? 90% of Americans thought we were going to get hit again. The only question was how big and where. 90%. 73% of Americans supported the Iraq War. Saddam Hussein was shooting at the American and British plane patrolling the southern and no-fly zones. We know he had chemical weapons because he used them on his own people, for crying out loud, used them on the Kurds, used them on the Iranians. He was giving $25,000 to families of homicide bombers. He was stealing billions from the Oil for Food program, doing Lord knows what with the money. I would argue if George W. Bush hadn't taken any kind of measure, and God forbid that later on one of those chemical weapons is handed off to a terrorist or used directly, he would have been impeached. And the thing that I find fascinating is that nobody seems to read the reports written by the weapons hunters that George W. Bush sent to find these stockpiles. David Kay and Charles Belfort, and both of them said the same thing. No, we didn't find the stockpiles, but let me tell you something. They were ready to roll. The scientists were all there, the blueprints were all there, the material was all there, it was all dispersed, but as soon as the heat was off, he was going to go back to doing it. So even if you didn't find the stockpile, both those gentlemen found that Saddam Hussein was ready to start it all up again once the heat was off, and the heat was not ready to be off because a lot of people wanted to take off the restrictions for the Oil for Food program. My goodness. And still the Republicans are called liars? This Bush lie people died? I can't think of anything more egregious than that. And still the majority of Democrats believe that Bush lied us into that war. And for Donald Trump to compound that, it's the only thing I thought he should apologize for. I gave a speech not long ago where I talked about the relationship between Jews and blacks. You've got people like Keith Ellison, the man who tried to get the DNC chair with a long-time relationship with Louis Farrakhan. You have President Obama, whose mentor, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, is a good friend of Louis Farrakhan. In fact, they've got a magazine called the Trumpet Magazine the church does, and Farrakhan was Man of the Year on top of it. Yet Obama said he had no idea about the relationship between Reverend Wright and Farrakhan. Really? The picture of Obama that was just now revealed, showing him with Minister Farrakhan, that had come out during the campaign, he probably would not have gotten elected. The relationship between the Nation of Islam and a lot of black news is really something, isn't it? Booker T. Washington was a good friend with a man named Rosenwald, who helped Booker T. Washington build over 5,000 black schools. He was a Jewish man. In the 60s during the civil rights protests, 75% of the non-blacks who went down to help register people to vote, 75% of the non-blacks were Jewish. That famous movie, Mississippi Burning, about the three young men who died, Messrs. Goodwin, Scherner, and Cheney, two of them were Jewish. In the 80s and early 90s, Israel airlifted about 16,000 Ethiopian Jews who were suffering famine and discrimination in Africa and took them to Israel. Without people like Jack Greenberg, who was a legal expert with MLK, and also helped to design the Board versus Brown versus Board of Education strategy used by Thurgood Marshall to win, who knows? A number of Jews were instrumental in the civil rights march, civil rights protest during that period of time. Yet, roughly 12% of the American people could be fairly described as anti-Semitic, but about a third of blacks could be described as anti-Semitic. So majority or not, but 3 times higher than among non-blacks. Please explain that to me. When you consider all of the things that Jews have done for blacks, all the help. There's a magazine called The Urge magazine. It's a magazine that's no longer around. It's an angry black magazine that was published by Ebony magazine. And they did a poll to find out how people felt about blacks. They had a bunch of negative stereotypes. Blacks are lazy, blacks are dumb, blacks complain too much about racism. It turned out that the group that was the least likely to say yes to those questions were Jews. Hispanics were more likely to say yes to those questions. Gentiles were more likely to say yes to those questions. Jews were the least likely to say. When you look at surveys of people as they become more and more affluent, they become more and more Republican. Not Jews. Not Jews. Right there. So if your argument is that the Democrats are for the little guy, Jews stay right there. Still, a third of blacks would be reasonably described as anti-Semitic. Scotty, beam me up. I want to say a few things about my mom, my dad, and then a couple stories, and we'll have a little Q&A. My mother was raised on a farm in Huntsville, Alabama. I was watching a documentary with my girlfriend Nina the other night, and it was about a ball player who was black from the South. And when he was raised, his home had no running water. But when I visited my grandparents' home in the 60s, they had no running water. They had an outhouse. And this player was talking about how he went out to his outhouse. He said he had no idea that he was poor until he found out that somebody in the area had a 2-seat outhouse. My mom had a 2-seat outhouse. Tall cotton. She always told me that education and hard work were the key. I remember sitting down and reading a book of all the presidents, from George Washington to the then incumbent Dwight Eisenhower. I was 6 years old, went over all of them. And at the end of it, she closed the book and she said, Larry, if you want it bad enough, if you work hard enough, you could be in this book. And it never occurred to me. It never occurred to me to think anything other than that. That's why it was so extraordinary after Obama won. I'm old school. I get the LA Times, the New York Times thrown to my house. I pick it up. There's a colored picture on both newspapers of all these black couples holding their kids saying, for the first time, I can now say, if you work hard enough, you can be anything you want to be. And I went on the air. I went on the air and I said, for the first time? What if Obama had lost? What are you going to say?
Never.
Are you kidding me? For the first time? We've had back-to-back black secretaries of state.
Yeah.
And this is are you kidding me? Virginia, Governor Doug Brown, governor of one of the Confederate states, are you kidding me? Racism is no longer a major problem in America. In fact, if you look at the polls, most voters had difficulty with John McCain's age than they had with Obama's race. It never occurred to me to think anything other than that. My mother told me a story about a man who made chimneys in the South. He could neither read nor write, but he was the best chimney maker because he made chimneys that didn't smoke. That's the big thing. They can't smoke. Always employed during the Great Depression because he was the best chimney maker. My mother said, if you have something of value to your community, they'll patronize you. Booker T. Washington said the same thing in 1901. Whenever a Negro boy learns to cook, to sew, or to wash dishes better than anybody else, he will be rewarded. That is the great human law that will never be nullified, he said. My father and I did not get along. But my father and I did not get along any better than my father got along with my two brothers. We all couldn't stand the SOB. Honestly, we really couldn't. And I don't mean just a little not standing him. I didn't like him in the house. He was smoldering, angry all the time, and wasn't angry for the same reason. It's one thing to be angry at something you know he's angry about. If he's not angry about that, angry about something different that he wasn't angry about before, you're just confused. Well, he starts a little cafe when I'm 10 or 11 years old, so now I have to work for the guy. So I'm working for him, and he's yelling at me, screaming at me, and I remember telling myself, the next time he yells at me, I'm out of here. I'm 15 years old now. I'd like to tell you that I said the next time he yells at me, I'm going to walk up to him and I'm going to say, now see here, pal, you and me. But I was afraid of my father. So I just said to myself, next time he yells at me, I'm going to leave. He yelled at me. I keep my seat at night, like 15 seats, so it's embarrassing when he yells at me. Everybody can see it. And I'm 15 years old being yelled at by this guy, so I walked out. By the way, the waitress had called in sick that day, so it was a building full of people. And I walked out with my dad. Not too surprisingly, he got home. He was not in a good mood. Why did you leave? He told me. I said, Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me. My dad paid me $10 a day plus tips. He multiplied $10, threw it at me. He walked out of my bedroom. My dad and I did not have a conversation for 10 years. And when I say did not have a conversation, I mean did not have a conversation. My dad came home at night, and I graduated from high school when I was 17, so I went away to the East Coast. So my dad and I literally avoided each other for 10 years. Now I'm 25 years old, I'm working at a major law firm, and I'm having difficulty sleeping. And I think it has something to do with some unresolved issue with my father. I'm not quite sure what, but I know it has something to do with him. I knew we would never be friends. So I called my secretary, I said, cancel all my appointments. I'm going to LA, I'll be back in 3 or 4 days. She said, fine. I didn't want my dad to know I was coming, I wanted to prepare for this. So I got to LAX, take a cab to the cafe, I walk in at 1:30, they close at 2:30. My father, of course, was surprised to see me, had 2 big bags. I said, Dad, I want to talk to you. He said, okay, should I put your bag in the back? I said, no, Dad, I'm only going to be here for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to take off. He said, okay, wait till we close. So I sat there for an hour. I said, now, Gary, be calm. Don't tell him everything he's ever done. Just give him the cliff notes. Just give him the highlights. So my dad sat down there, and of course, I told him everything. I teed off. You guys know how I can go. I must have spoken for 20 minutes. I told him every whipping, every spanking, anything he ever said to me that ticked me off, everything. And then finally, I ran out of ammo. My dad went, is that it? You didn't speak to me for 10 years because of that? And I said, yeah. And he said, let me tell you about my father. And I need to pause here. I knew my dad was an only child. I knew he had no relatives. Nobody ever came over, and we never got any presents. And the phone never rang for him. But beyond that, I knew nothing about my dad. And I didn't care because I didn't like him anyway. But no one ever talked about it. He said, let me tell you about my father. And I found out for the first time, Elder, my last name, not the name of my dad's biological father. My dad never met his biological father. He doesn't know who his biological father is. Elder was the name of some dude who was in his life the longest. One of a series of irresponsible boyfriends, each one more irresponsible than the one before. Elder was an alcoholic who physically beat up my dad's mother. My dad would intervene, he'd beat him up. This is what my dad experienced. My dad comes home at the age of 13. He's making too much noise for his mom's then boyfriend. The mom sides with the boyfriend, throws my father out of the house, never to return. You're talking about a black boy, Jim Crow South, at the beginning of the Great Depression, Athens, Georgia. Never to return. My dad walked down the street to whatever work he could get. Ultimately, he became a Pullman porter on the train, which is why he ended up in California. He traveled all over the country. And he came to California one time, and it was sunny, and everything seemed so bright, and people seemed so friendly. My dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll come to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joined the Marines. I said, why, Dad? He said, because they go where the action is. They have the best uniforms. My dad was stationed on the island of Guam. He was a cook. And my dad got out of the military, went to Chattanooga where he had married my mom to get him a job as a cook. He went to restaurant after restaurant after restaurant. He was told, we don't hire haters. My dad went to an unemployment office. The lady says, you went to the wrong door. He goes to the hall, sees colored only, goes to that door, to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad came home, told my mother, this is BS, although he used other expressions. I'm going to California, I'm going to get me a job as a short order cook. My dad comes out to California, walks all around for 2 days, and he's told, I'm sorry, you have no references. My dad said, I'll work for free, just give me a reference every 2 weeks. They wouldn't even do that. So California treated him the same way. They were just a little more genteel about it. My dad goes to the unemployment office, this time just one door. Sits there for a day and a half, then he calls him up. I have something, I don't know if you'll want it. My dad said, whatever it is, I'm sure I'm going to want it. She said, it's a job cleaning toilets for Nabisco bread. My dad took that job for 10 years, cleaning toilets for Nabisco brand bread. Took a second job, full-time, cleaning toilets for a company called Barber and Bread. Went to night school at night to get his GED, and cooked occasionally for a family in Pacific Palisades to make a little extra money. The man never slept, which was why he was cranky all the time. Because my dad smoked, I got smaller and smaller and smaller. My dad got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I said, Dad, I am so sorry. And my dad said, don't be. Just follow my advice. Hard work wins. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you bitch, moan, and whine about what somebody did to you, said to you, go to the nearest mirror and say, what could I have done to change the outcome? And sooner or later, no matter how hard you work, no matter how good you are, bad things will happen. How you respond to those bad things will tell your mother and me whether or not we raised a man. With two stories. The first one's about my mother, the other one is just about America. My mother told me and my brothers, never, ever, ever allow somebody to make you feel inferior. They cannot make you feel inferior without your permission, she used to say. In high school, we read a poem by a guy named County Cullen in a course on African American literature. And it goes like this. While riding through Baltimore so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. And I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, so I smiled. He poked out his tongue. He called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. I was ticked off, teacher was ticked off, class was ticked off. Teacher talked about this being a permanent scar to his psyche. He'll always think of himself as a second-class citizen. This is the lingering legacy, damage done to somebody's psyche because of racism, on and on and on. I knew my mother would have a different take. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I got home, my mother was cooking a big pot of chicken, never forget it. I said, Mom, we read a poem in class in high school, I want to get your reaction to it. She said, sure, what is it? Because it goes like this. While riding through Baltimore, so small and full of glee, I saw a young Baltimorean keep looking straight at me. I was young and very small, and he was no whit bigger, so I smiled. But he poked out his tongue and called me nigger. I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until September. All the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. My mother took the fork out of the pot, turned to me, and she said, Larry, what a damn shame he let something so trivial spoil his vacation. How many wings do you want? Let me just end with every now and then, in the most bizarre way, you're just reminded of how great this country is, how lucky we are, how lucky I am. I pulled up to a gas station a few months ago. Lake Model Car gave me my sponsor. I had a nice suit on. One of my sponsors tailored it. Pull out my credit card with standard credit limit on. I get premium gas and I'm waiting. Car pulls up next side. A 1968 Dodge Carrera with a busted muffler. Two guys get out, pale, pasty skin. I can tell they're father or son because they have resemblance. Out-of-state license plate. I won't tell you the state because I don't want anybody to feel demeaned. But collectively, they might have had 8 teeth between the two of them. Maybe 9. And they get $5 a breakup. And they pull off. And as they're leaving off, I said to myself, wow, just think. Those two dudes owe me reparations. This is a great country or what? Thank you so much. And God bless you. And God bless you. Thank you.
Stage. So we had some questions submitted by area members, and I know they're ready to speak. Hopefully these questions will resonate with some of you. We touched on some of these already there. Jews overwhelmingly vote Democrat. Will that ever change?
That's a very good question. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get how Jews can vote for a party that has such a hostile attitude towards Israel. I don't get that. I mentioned to you that the most loyal constituent of the Democratic Party class, 95% class, yet a third of them could be reasonably called anti-Semitic. But this is the same party that so many Jews are in. I don't get it. I don't get the Jewish support for further gun control legislation. As you know, the guy with the mustache, one of the first things he did was to pass restrictive laws to make sure Jews could not own firearms. This is the party that supports race-based preferences. Quotas were used to suppress Jewish progress in colleges, universities, and other institutions around America. So why it is that a people who made it through busting their butt, working hard, embracing family, does not support the party that believes in hard work and family is beyond me. And I'm hoping that will change. And I'm hoping that Donald Trump can do something. I think moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to the Obama administration had officials referring to Bibi Netanyahu as chicken plea, because they didn't say plea. You recall John Kerry pounded Israel for their opinion, his opinion, overreacting to the war against Lebanon. I mean, on and on and on. We can talk about what the Democratic Party has been doing to undermine, in my opinion, the state of Israel and to promote the Palestinians. You know, we've given Palestinians more money per capita than we gave the Europeans and Japan under the Marshall Plan. I mean, I can go on and on.
What's at stake for the November midterm elections?
What's at stake? Well, if the Democrats take over the House, there'll be impeachment articles, of course, against Donald Trump. I don't believe, I'm not one of those who believes that even Democrats are so stupid as to really try to impeach him. Think about this. They'd be impeaching him for political differences. Trump is not well liked because he's boastful, because he's bragging. But give me, what has he done that causes him to be impeached? He's engaged in something that they call collusion. Nobody can even define it. Let me suggest something to you. In the waning days of the George W. Bush administration, Republicans fund a dossier that's taken to the FISA court, used it wiretaps so that members of the Obama campaign team are surveilled. For 13 months of his administration, He is dogged by charges of collusion. They can't find anything. Now it's gone from collusion to lying to an investigator, to obstruction of justice, to money laundering, whatever happened to the C word, collusion. If this were Obama, the country would be on fire. We wouldn't be able to leave without picking up the paper and seeing something on fire in Chicago, Philadelphia. What do you think Black Lives Matter will be saying? What do you think the Black Lives Matter will be saying? Wait, first black president, and you are investigating for what? What? And nobody can even define what it is? The country will be on fire. I think Republicans have behaved remarkably well, considering how outrageous this investigation has been. If the Democrats take over the House, you can pretty much forget about the wall. So there are lots of things that are at stake. And I do not believe that it's a slam dunk that the Democrats will take over the House. Look at the economy. All of a sudden, there's been about a 20-point swing in how people feel about the tax bill. Just a month ago, most Americans did not support it, now most Americans do support it. The stock market has gained most of the losses. I think now it's under about 3% its peak. It's still, the economy is stupid. We start off and enrolling at 4% GDP. There's a good chance that the Republicans will retain control of both chambers of the House of Congress.
So that leads to the next question. In light of what we've all learned, the Russia investigation, where do we go from here?
I think we're going to let it play out. It doesn't matter what the investigation is, because the result will be taken over to the House. Because I don't believe that you can legally indict an incumbent president. The way you get rid of an incumbent president is through the impeachment process. So it would require the Mueller team, first of all, to come up with evidence of collusion. I'm not even sure that they will, but assuming they do, they take it to the House. The House then has the impeachment proceedings, assuming Donald Trump were to be impeached. It then goes to the Senate. It takes 2/3 of the Senate to kick him out of office, and there has never been a senator, ever, who was voted to kick off a president of his own party. Never. Not during the Clinton impeachment, not during the Andrew Johnson impeachment. A senator has never voted to kick off a president of his own party. It's not going to happen now. So he's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be a big pain. It's going to throw a lot of sawdust into his agenda, but he's not going anywhere. 7 more years.
Very intense question. In light of the most recent school shooting, what steps would you recommend be taken?
Well, everybody's talking about that, of course. The choices, in my opinion, are hardening the target or pushing for gun control regulation. And I vote door number 1, harden the target. One of the things that's interesting about this debate, this idea of banning banning the AR-15. I think the AR-15 might be used in less than 1% of all the gun crime in America. Only about 3% of all gun crime in America involves a long arm, and not all the long arms are AR-15s. If you really want to ban a semi-automatic long gun, the argument for banning that is the same for the argument for banning a handgun. They're all semi-automatic weapons. A skilled person using a semi-automatic handgun can kill as many people as somebody using a long arm. People that make the argument that if you get rid of this gun or that gun or this gun, ignore the fact that bad guys are bad guys by definition. If you make it more difficult for good guys to get guns, all you're doing is shifting the balance of power from the good guys to the bad guys. Two other things amazed me about watching this debate. I watched hours and hours of television over the weekend. Not one time did I hear anybody, even on Fox, talk about how many lives are saved every year by people able to use a gun. In the documentary that I did called Michael and Me, I interviewed a man named Gary Klett. He's a Florida state criminologist. He estimates that every year 1.25 million Americans use a gun to defend themselves. Out of that number, 40% believe, but for the gun, I would have been dead. Now, generally speaking, it's just brandishing the gun. That's all it takes. 1.25 million. Now, Barack Obama quietly ordered the CDC to do some research on how often Americans use guns to defend themselves. for whatever reason, the organization, by regulation, is barred from doing any original research. So all they can do is look at existing research. And the CDC very quietly came back and said, there is at least one defensive use of a gun for every illegal use, at least. And they mentioned the study I just now talked about, the very correct study that shows the number could be well in excess of a million. So there's no question that Americans use guns a whole lot more than, in my opinion, guns are misused accidentally or used illegally in a crime. And to not even talk about that, I used to have Chief Bernard Parks on my radio show once a month. And Parks is a big anti-concealed carry guy. By the way, isn't it interesting how the rank and file cops want citizens to have concealed carry? It's the brass that does it. And I said to him, how often do Americans use guns to defend themselves? I don't know. Is it relevant? No. It isn't relevant to know how often Americans know. As a chief, I told you that in Switzerland by law, every house has a firearm plus ammunition, and they have a very low per capita murder rate. What would you say? He said, I would say I don't live in Switzerland.
One last question, I know it's getting late, this is kind of a fun one, for speculation. Who do you think Democratic candidates will be in 2020?
Wow. I haven't even thought about that. Does it matter? And when I say it doesn't matter, I mean necessarily, what is their message? What is the Democratic message? Tax more, spend more, $15 minimum wage, resist, we hate Trump. What's their message? If you are a Democrat, you didn't say jack during the last 8 years when Obama did Obamacare, $800 billion in new regulations. All these things Obama did, raising taxes, to give us this tepid recovery, you didn't say anything. What are your ideas? What do you have? You can't grow. All you can do is talk about what a mean SOB Donald Trump is. They've got nothing. Booker probably going to run, Cory Booker probably going to run, Karen McAuliffe, the former governor of Virginia, former DNC chair is going to run, Kamala Harris is going to run, Biden may run. It doesn't matter. Trump's going to beat him.
All right, how do you like to say? So before everyone leaves, focus on traffic. I want to say our three people again that made such a difference tonight. Rabbi Ed Weinstein, who made such a difference letting us have the facility in our lives. Judy, my wife Stephanie, this could not have happened without them. They're fantastic.